Hello, my name is Shelby and welcome back to Bookshelves. Today I want to talk about something that I think we are all familiar with, which is the fact that buying books and reading books are two very different hobbies. As some of you might have seen in my last video, I'm getting married slash got married this year, and I'm trying to be, I think, more conscious than ever of how much I'm spending and whether or not that spending is actually practical. So instead of a sort of traditional book haul today where I go out and buy books and then tell you all about them, I thought we could try hauling my bookshelf because there are a ton of books I already own and haven't read that I think I just need to get excited about all over again. So to kick things off, I think I will go ahead and just take a scan of my shelves and pull a few books off, and we can sit down and talk about them. Up here is where all of my mythology retellings, almost all of which are Greek mythology retellings, live. And there are a few that I know I got at Christmas that I have yet to read. So let me pull those first. This is my classic shelf, and I have another one that stands out to me that I picked up last summer and have yet to revisit. This is my fantasy and sci-fi corner, which is home to many a book I've yet to read. Okay, that took truly 2 minutes, and I think I have enough books pulled here to fill at least the next 6 months of my reading. So let's sit down and talk about them. Okay, I'm absolutely surrounded by books right now. Like I said, I think I've found enough reading to fill my days for the next 6 months easily. Let's go ahead and jump into what books I've pulled off my shelves. Interestingly enough, I know I said that my mythology section is almost exclusively Greek mythology. The 4 books I pulled off that shelf are actually each from a different region. So you're going to get a little bit more variety than you might otherwise normally get from me in the mythology genre. So let me pull these first two. Okay. This is Lavinia by Ursula K. Le Guin, which I have had for 2 years now. I think I got it 2 Christmases ago. And it follows the story of Lavinia, who, if I understand correctly, was the mother of the founders of Rome. So she is a figure that comes out of Roman mythology, and I think specifically shows up in the Aeneid. Ursula K. Le Guin is a classic author in the sci-fi and fantasy genre. And I have been dying to read some of her work for some time now. She's been on my author must-read list the last couple years. And about 2 years ago, I read The Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood, who is another, acclaimed feminist writer who took on a mythology retelling, and I absolutely loved it. So I thought that might be a good place to start with Le Guin. She has a huge collection, obviously, of other sci-fi and fantasy works, but I know that mythology is one place where I can almost always find something I love. So very excited to read this one. I love the cover of this book. I think it's really beautiful, but really simple. And this Tiffany blue-green color, chef's kiss. From Rome, we'll head up to the world of Norse mythology. This is The Weaver and the Witch Queen by Genevieve Gornichek. I read and loved The Witch's Heart last year by Gornichek, and I was super excited to pick up her next book when it came out. That book followed the wife of Loki, who was the mother of 3 great monsters who bring about the end of the world in Norse mythology. And The Weaver and the Witch Queen, I think, is a little bit more of a combination of Norse mythology and more just historical fiction. But I have heard people speak very highly about it, as they have with her other works. So I would love to continue to kind of build my Norse mythology understanding, and I'm very excited to pick this up. One piece of Greek mythology I'm very excited to read is Clytemnestra by Costanza Casati. Here again, Another exquisite book cover. I feel like the mythology retelling genre has some of the best covers out there, and really wide use of gold foiling, which I approve of. Clytemnestra is a character from Greek mythology who I have already read a lot about, but I'm really excited to read a book that is fully centering her story specifically. I guess, should I say spoiler alert? It's like an ancient myth, so I don't know if I should or shouldn't say that about the story, but caution if you aren't familiar with the myth of Clytemnestra. For those of you who don't know, Clytemnestra is the wife of Agamemnon, who was sort of the head of the Greek army in the Trojan War. And as a part of that, her myth becomes one of revenge, because Agamemnon and all of his boats on the way to war are held up without wind, seemingly because of an offense to the gods. And so he seeks to sacrifice his daughter, his eldest daughter, in a time when like human sacrifice was not common any longer, to please the gods. And so he tricks his wife, Clytemnestra, to bring his daughter, Iphigenia, to the island where the boats are stranded, under the guise that his daughter is going to be married off to Achilles. So his wife shows up for what she thinks is going to be her daughter's wedding day and actually witnesses her daughter's murder. And then Agamemnon goes off to war for a very, very long time, leaving Clytemnestra to plot her revenge. And so her story is a really interesting one that I am eager to revisit from a new perspective. And lastly, from my mythology retelling shelf, I have a story I am so excited about. This is Every Rising Sun by Jamila Ahmed, and it is a retelling of the story of Scheherazade, who is the woman at the center of the 1001 Arabian Nights tale. There was an era with a king who was cruel beyond measure. Every night he takes a new wife, and every morning he murders her. And the cycle goes on and on and on as more women are pulled out of the kingdom and taken to his bed for slaughter. And Scheherazade prevents this fate for herself. She's summoned to the king's bed and tells him a story with such a cliffhanger, he cannot kill her. He has to know how it ends. And this story goes on for nights and nights and nights as she is fighting for her life and her ability to survive. And while I think that general tale is something I have heard a lot about before and seen referenced in other kinds of fantasy writing, I've never seen a retelling of that story from Scheherazade's perspective. So I'm crazy excited about this. This was recommended by Jean over at Jean's Bookish Thoughts, and I take her recommendations very seriously. So I'm absolutely buzzing to have a chance to read this for myself. Where to go next? Let's stick with fantasy for a while, just adjacent to the mythology retelling world. The next book that I grabbed is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, and this is a gorgeous, gorgeous book series. I mean, like, look at these covers, and the spines are all gorgeous. They make a beautiful image along the spines as well. Ken Liu, first, I think, really got involved in the literary world as a translator. And I think he's a very intentionally curated translator. He's translated some of the most well-acclaimed stories that have come to the US in English out of Chinese languages. And he has since published several things of his own accord where he's the author, not the translator. I think he's a pretty widely celebrated sci-fi and fantasy author. This is his epic fantasy series. I do believe it's based on real history that comes out of one of the dynasties in China, but the basic premise is we're following an empire in a period of revolution against an evil sort of emperor-like figure, but it's a fantasy world, so there's some interesting technology and magic that informs that conflict as well. My understanding is the first book in this series is quite like a sweeping multi-generational story that sets up the conflict. And then the other books are a more close and narrow timeline look at the conflict itself. But I cannot wait to find the next epic series where I will feel completely swept away and in a different world. And I do trust that Ken Liu is the person to do that for me. So I'm very excited to actually pick this up in the near future. And I already have all 4 books. Yes, I bought the entire series before I knew if I liked it. So if I like this story, I have all the rest of the books queued up and ready to go. I do think that this is going to be my next read. It's Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, which is, of course, by Heather Fawcett. I adored Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I picked it up in January of this year and then did decide to buy the sequel. First of all, here again. Beautiful cover, another excellent use of foiling. But what to tell you, the first book in this series, since it is a sequel, follows Emily Wilde, who is a professor of dryadology in sort of a alternative historical fiction fantasy world that is mostly like ours, but fae and folklore creatures are real, and her job is to study them. She is writing an encyclopedia all about the fae and travels to this remote, sort of like Icelandic setting to kind of complete her encyclopedia with the study of these very reclusive, otherwise unknown fae creatures. It's a really sweet, funny, endearing, cozy story about this sort of socially awkward and occasionally grumpy academic and her dynamic with another colleague who sort of invites himself on her trip and has a sort of mysterious past and is very charismatic, kind of helping her navigate some of the social challenges that are coming up in her research. It's very much a light academia story, cozy fantasy, and this sequel follows them on their next great adventure. So I'm super excited to read this, and like I said, I'm probably going to make this my very next read. Speaking of sequels, this is The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. I love the Darker Shade of Magic series by V.E. Schwab, and this is the first book in the continuation series. So the original trilogy is complete. It's been done for quite a long time, but this picks up, to my understanding, following new characters and revisiting some of our old favorites. It's an enormous book. God, look at how big it is. And I bought it pre-order so I could read it the second it came out last fall, and then did not read it. I don't know if the size intimidated me or if I just kind of let myself get distracted by other books, but I know how much I love this world already, and I'm so excited to return to it and see kind of where the story goes next, because there were definitely some loose threads to begin with. And then there are some new interesting things that are being introduced to the world. So I cannot wait to pick this up. It should also probably be pretty high on my list before it becomes completely irrelevant. And like the next book in the series comes out before I've read the first one. Speaking of fae stories, this is Let in the Mist by Hope Mirrlees. And I bought this because it's a piece of pre-Tolkien fantasy writing from a female author in the 1920s. Obviously, J.R.R. Tolkien had such an incredible impact on the fantasy genre in his Lord of the Rings books, and I think has really, really shaped how we conceive of a lot of that like classic high fantasy world building, settings, magical races, all of that good stuff. So the idea of reading sort of fantastical stories from before his time really appeals to me, to kind of see like how else we were imagining fantasy as a genre. And this book comes highly, highly recommended. Neil Gaiman calls it the single most beautiful and unjustifiably forgotten novel of the 21st century. And it follows this sort of mundane man. I think he's the mayor of his small town. And it's a town that is on a river. So on one side of the river is where the normal people live, and on the other side of the river, deep in a forest, are where the fae and fair folk live. And I believe his son, or perhaps somebody else from the village, crosses over the river and gets lost in the Fey world. And so this sort of curmudgeonly older man has to go on an adventure into the Fey world to get this person back. I'm really enjoying Fey stories, and that sort of more magical realism. Like, is folklore real, or is it sort of a warning we made up for ourselves? As a genre, I'm currently reading Spinning Silver, which has great sort of Fey and fair folk mythology going on. And of course, the Emily Wilde series does as well. So I'm really eager to see what a much earlier version of that kind of story looked like. Okay, I think we've got 2 more books in the fantasy or fantasy adjacent genre. This is A Winter's Promise by Christelle Davos. Yes, Davos. And I believe it's actually a YA novel that was translated out of the French into the English. And my understanding is it's this sort of fantasy world where everybody lives on cities that are like in these little spires in the sky, which screams Castle in the Sky, the Studio Ghibli movie, to me. So I love that concept in and of itself. And I believe that it follows a young girl who is married off to a wealthy family that lives in a different spire. And so she kind of moves to functionally a whole new world and is having all kinds of strange encounters, both with the magical and with the political. It comes highly reviewed by several booktubers who I love. I think I first saw it being talked about by Reagan at the Peruse Project. So I'm very eager to see what I think of this book because it is a completed series, I believe, as well. So if I like it, there's plenty more where this comes from. Next on my list is a little bit of Terry Pratchett. This is The Truth. I have a couple of Terry Pratchett books on my shelf that I haven't had a chance to read yet. The Truth is probably the one I'm most interested in. I got this beautiful, beautiful library collector's edition as a part of a bundle. You can buy them all individually, but a lot of them are sort of bundled by larger series or larger theme in his Discworld. If you don't know, Terry Pratchett is a very highly acclaimed author of very like satirical and parody-like fantasy writing. His Discworld has more than 40 books in it, so it can be a bit intimidating as to where to begin. I started with the Moist von Lipwig series, which is a delightful series of stories about a con man who ends up running these like small bureaucratic institutions like the post office. They're great, great fun. And when I bought those books, they were bundled together with 2 others, including The Truth. The Truth is a story all about the newspaper. And I think in 2024, during an election year, when AI is booming and we're all constantly wondering if what we're reading online is real, a story about like parody and satire in the news in a fantasy world is going to be just the sort of healing chicken noodle soup my soul needs to make it through this year. So I'm very excited to pick this one up as well. And last but not least, out of this massive pile of books is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I have not read this yet. I bought it when it came out. I was so excited to be a part of the discussion. And I think I got this during a rush of Christmas gifting. So I had several books given to me at once, and this beautiful, highly acclaimed story did not get read. So for anybody who doesn't know, Babel is a historical fantasy story that follows a young Chinese boy who was adopted by a British professor out of Oxford, and who was raised and then sent off to university to really leverage the magical power of his being bilingual. So of course he speaks his native, I believe, Cantonese, and then speaks English, which he learns in his adopted household. And the magic in this world is this idea of like what is lost in translation being captured and carved into silver bars, such that you can kind of use the power of what is lost or what remains to be true when you translate words. I'm probably not describing that very well because I haven't read the book yet. But R.F. Kuang is, one of the hottest authors of the day. I think she's really just been incredibly highly acclaimed across all of the different books she's put out recently. And I have many good personal friends who've highly recommended this story, which I believe is really one of dark academia and student revolution and colonialism. So I think there's a lot of really interesting themes to be explored in this story, and it's one that I know everybody loves. And I will probably love it. So I'm very excited to pick this one up. This one I'll probably put at the end of my list so I can read it close to the fall, because this is giving big, moody, spooky, autumnal energy, back to school energy. But I am genuinely really excited to read this for myself and share my thoughts on it. Okay. That is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 11 books I hauled off my own bookshelf that I cannot wait to read and tell you all about. I would also highly recommend you trying this yourself. I imagine that many of us have many a book that we could be, appreciating that are already on our shelves. I should mention, outside of hauling my own bookshelf, as I do happen to have a large collection of unread books, there are lots of other things I do for reading that don't require purchasing individual books. I am a member of the local library. I live in Chicago, so I have a really big library system, which allows me to check out books directly through the library, physically on audio or in ebook format. And then I also use Libby sometimes to supplement accessing my library. And then I'm also a subscriber to Everand, which used to be called Script, which is an audiobook and ebook platform as well. So for I think it's a $12 subscription monthly, you can consume as many stories as you want. And their library of content does rotate over time. So that's how I get a lot of my audiobooks. And I would highly recommend both of those tools if you're looking to buy less, or at least read before you buy more, which is something I've started doing. So now if I rent a book from the library or read a book on audio that I love and I want it to be a part of my collection, I'll buy it, as opposed to aspirationally buying books and then finding out I only think they're kind of mediocre. Okay, that is all I have for you today. Thank you for joining me for this little haul my bookshelf video. Tell me what you're reading down below and what you notice is still on your shelf that you need to get to. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.